Welcome back to another episode of the Bear Trap, a Bears podcast by a Bears fan. I'm your host, Terry, and today doing a recap of our loss against the Green Bay Packers. I forgot what week this is. I want to say 14, something like that. But anyway, there's a lot to say, and I really struggled to figure out how to structure all this because there's a lot to say. But let me start off by saying this because I already know how Bears fans are. Okay, let's talk about the penalties. Yes, I agree. There was one egregious penalty that was missed. I wouldn't say blatant, but missed. And then there was a second one that I think was missed, but wasn't egregious. So, the whole Cordell Robinson first down and goal thing, it was extremely close. If any of us didn't have a zoom up, we would not know what to call that. So let's just be honest with yourselves. But zooming up, even still, it's close, but I think there's a little bit of green there, so you can say that was a first down. But a tough call. I'm not going to we got 3 points out of that. Could have been 7. That's a 4-point swing. It is what it is. Now, the big one was the kick-catch interference, where it was clearly a missed call. And so a bang-bang play in fast speed, of course, or regular speed. When you go to slow motion, you can see these things. We can see it a lot clearer. It was easy. So, to me, and I'm not sure if that's reviewable or not, but to me, if you look at it slow motion, it's very clear. There was no catch interference. There was no catch interference, and there was no signal. And there's sometimes different things, and different refs play around with it. What is? Because some people will try to do different arm motions and be like, oh no, that wasn't a fair catch. So there's a little nuance there, but if you slow it down, even if he called a fair catch, the man caught the ball, he didn't hit him and before the ball, so that is what it is. But with that being said, there's no guarantee. We recovered the ball, but there's no guarantee we score. There's no guarantee we get points. So at the low end, it's a 3-point swing, and then you're talking about we still lose. But at the high end, you're talking about a touchdown 7-point swing, take away 7 from them, give 7 to us. We win the game. So, yes, you can make a definite decision that is a big call. I would never say it's not, especially with momentum, which you can't measure. But at the end of the day, even if we got the call, we don't know what would have happened. So, there's that. So, very bad call. Should have been our ball. All that good stuff. And, we'll never know. So, let me get that out the way. Now that that's done, let's talk about the real issues. Because for surface level fans, one call, one kick, Cody Parker, makes the game. As I've said many times, that's not true. There's a whole entire game. And so, there's other ways to make up for it. There's always going to be bad plays. There's always going to be good plays. There's always going to be refs and all that. And so if you blow them out by 30, guess what? That 7-point swing means nothing. And so there's that. Now, let's start with the offense. And I think the way I'm going to do this is we're going to talk about long-term and short-term because we are eliminated from playoff contention. And so I'm still going to cover it, as I mentioned, regularly, but in the moment, this seems like a good time to take stock of where we are. And so let's start with the offense. So I'm not going to go position by position because I think I'm going to do that in a different video, but just to talk about some of the things. The play calling. Oh, how things are fun, because let me start by saying this. Offense, defense, football in general. If you watch my draft stuff, this is a draft channel, you would know this. And this doesn't apply just to the draft, but to everything, almost in life. When I watch the draft and I see a good player, guess what I also note and what I started to note as I covered the draft? I note how many games I've watched. Because guess what? If I pull up Mitch Trubisky against Tampa last year, 6 touchdowns, and I said, hey, watch this game and tell me what you think this quarterback is. What would most people say if they never saw him play any other game? They would have some opinions. But then guess what? You show them a whole 3 years worth of games, and that's a different opinion. you're talking about consistency. We know what the skills are for the most part. We know what the skills are, and we can evaluate what your level of skill is, but then you have to evaluate how much does it transfer. Do you do the same things when you're playing a low team, a good team, a great team? Do you do the same things against a cover 2, a cover 3, a man coverage? Do you do the same thing when you have pressure, when you don't have pressure? All these different things. Can you do it with short receivers, tall receivers, fast receivers? All these different things. What's the consistency? The more information you get, the more you can spread it throughout and make a solid opinion. And so I say that to say, with play calling, we had this debate last week. It was the same play. I told you it was the same play calling. And before I said that, it was, oh man, the offensive coordinator must have had the play calls. Oh man, we finally did something different. Oh, we finally fixed it. And then you saw it was the same play calling. Well, now we're going to make excuses. Oh, I still, I think that somebody else was calling the plays. Well, we called the same plays, but we called it in a different order. What? What are you talking about? We ran that curl concept like 10 times. Ain't no different order. That don't mean anything. And so there is nuance to play calling, but it's consistency. So when you're talking about, well, okay, it was so good. If the plays we called and the schemes we ran didn't work early, and then all of a sudden worked, and you're looking at teams that didn't play well defensively, that's the common denominator. And so while Green Bay might not statistically be great, they got a lot more talent and a lot more pass rush than Dallas does. And so I would argue they got better talent, but either way, you saw how that played out early on. Later, it got a little different. It got very different, and I'll give them that. But the point is, when we're talking about play calling or players or anything else, the consistency. And so in the short term, like I said, talking about this game, you're very much talking about a first and second quarter, the first half, where I just don't understand what we were doing. Again, we try to run the ball just arbitrarily. It really feels like we're just throwing it in there just to do it, because we threw all these play actions and there's no believability to our play actions. And then we run these inside zones, and we ran a lot with Cohen later, and it's not doing anything. And I'll get to that later in a different video, but part of that is the running back's fault. And so you get that, and then you just get all these spread concepts going to Tariq Cohen. And it's like watching a college game. And we talked about this before, it has no intentionality. Last week, I pointed out, you're talking about numbers advantage when we run certain plays. You're talking about a coverage that we're taking advantage of when we run a skinny post. You're talking about intentionality. You're talking about guys coming up field, running the screen behind them. Things that made sense to attack that defense. This time, once again, it was just like, well, okay, there's no intentionality to it. Now, later in the game, I would say that changed. But then you also add in a mix of Trubisky just changing his game up. And I'll talk about, again, later position by position. But I really believe the Lamar Jackson effect is real. That's my guess, but I'll talk about that later. And so we see him moving the ball with scrambling. We see him moving. We always see him try to extend plays, but actually extending plays by like throwing across platform and all that stuff. So we've seen Trubisky take some risk, and that changed up the second half a little bit as well. But for the most part, it is what it is, especially when you got a team and an offense and a scheme like Aaron Rodgers on the other side, where you just see it is not as creative or intentional. Almost everything the Packers do is intentional. It is attacking exactly what you're showing. And we don't do that. We haven't done that consistently. And so that's one thing. Yeah, I won't go too much to Montgomery. We saw him leave for a little bit. Now it's possibly an injury, but he came back later. I don't know if it was an injury, but they ran the ball to Tariq Cohen a lot more. And look, Dave Montgomery just wasn't making decisions and good decisions. And we'll look at the film to see it, but that's just kind of how I feel about that. So, uh, well, let me go back. I'm sorry, I skipped. So that was the short term. In the long term, a lot of people talk about switching play calling duties to Helflich. I can't even pronounce his name. But here's the thing to me, and I've talked about this before. The whole let's just do something to do it, I don't agree with. That doesn't mean anything. But when you're talking about the actual dynamics of it, look, he came from Oregon under Chip Kelly, one of the most spread offenses we ever seen. And then he ended up taking over Oregon and continued that tradition. There's nothing in his resume that makes me think he's going to be any much different than Matt Nagy. And again, I'm not in there, but from what they told us when they hired everybody is that Nagy and Helfrich and what is his name? The offensive line coach, Stan, and like these other guys, they get together and they created the playbook and they create plays. And so it's not like Nagy's just off to himself making plays and then he tells them to figure it out. No, they make it together. And so I don't know that the play design would be different. And even if it was, I don't know that the play calling style would be different because, again, like that's where they come from. This bubble screen, this zone, inside zone, outside zone run, zone play action, RPO, like that's where they come from. And to me, I think that's just not a good design for us. And at least the way we've been teaching it. And so I don't have any confidence that switching to him would change much. So that's why I think in the long term, looking towards next season. The run game, as I mentioned, we'll look at the film, but yeah. In general, the O-line, just talking about them, we need upgrades. And look, I've talked about this. It's so funny because I get it from both sides, and that's the nature of YouTube. People, when I said the offensive line is this, that, and the other, we need upgrades, bunch of backlash. Now, when I point out the offensive line in videotape, the truth, and not to say I've never said we're great or good or don't need upgrades. I just said the blame is overstated. That does, let's not be 0 to 100. That doesn't mean we're great. That just means it's overstated. Then it's like, oh man, you're defending the O-line. You're an idiot. You don't know that. Like, come on. And so I get it from both ways. It's funny, but I've been consistent. I've said from the draft up until now, the spots we need to get better at, and I'll go position through position. But in looking at this game specifically, in the short term, Kenny Clark ate our lunch, ate Rashard Coward's lunch mostly, and I've talked about Coward for many times, and so there's that. What's his name, Lucas or whatever the right tackle's name is, has been a lot better than expected. We haven't been great, but we didn't get absolutely destroyed every single time. And so we got more time than I thought we would, especially in pass plays. But overall, it wasn't great. And I know those are numbers. I don't trust the pressure numbers, to be honest, because who decides what a pressure is? But to me, I just, again, I think we need upgrades there when we're talking about long term. And I don't know. Honestly, the only one I would say is safe is Cody Whitehair, but he's not a center. He has to be a guard. And so if I couldn't figure out a way to make him a guard, I don't know that I keep him. And so that's how I feel about them long term. Trubisky, I'm sure I'll have an in-depth discussion about him soon, but it's what I said. And despite the penalties and stuff, there were so many should have been interceptions, and we talked about decision making last week. And again, it's like it's not ever to just be right or whatever. It's just what's on the tape. And so what translates, what's consistent, as I said earlier, The issues you've seen before are the issues you see now. And they come up and when it matters. Yes, when it's low competition or low stakes or somebody makes a play for him. Yes, we can talk about how good it is. But when it's time to be above average and really be great, we see what happens. And so Trubisky, as I mentioned, did some things we haven't seen before and felt a lot more confident in a different type of play style. But I've said it before, his wheels are always spinning and he's pressuring himself to be too much, and I don't think it's going to work out in Chicago. That's just what it is. But funny enough, during the halftime, I was looking at my draft report for Trubisky, and I realized that I never shared it, because my first video on this YouTube channel, at least, was after he got drafted. But I don't think I shared, every year I share my reports, but I don't think I shared that one because that was before I was on YouTube. I was on a different platform. So I'm going to go through that in the next video. Again, like I said, breaking down the positions. But it was interesting looking at my notes from him coming out of college and to see where he's at now. So there's that. But in long term, I've said my piece on Trubisky, and I told you I wasn't going to change it because I feel confident in what I saw. All right, let's jump over to defense. Well, let me say offense. As far as a grade, I give us a B-. Wasn't great, but we were tough, and we got bailed out by some penalties. People keep crying about the refs. There's bad calls everywhere. We got bailed out a couple times, but we fought tough and we did some things. So definitely that, but it was not as crisp as you would have liked. As far as a MVP, nobody was great, but I guess you got to go Anthony Miller. All right, so defensively, started out in a lot of man coverage, and you talk about being intentional. We had Aaron Rodgers and that offense really, especially on that fourth down, take advantage of that. And they picked it apart, and but they started attacking it. And they ran man beaters, and they ran plays that they knew was going to hurt man coverage. And not only man coverage, but cover one, man free, as somebody say. So we had Eddie Jackson up playing tight ends and whatnot early on, and Clint Dix was staying back there. Now, again, I said that's the advantage you get. You can bring any of them up or keep one of them back deep middle, but we saw what that gamble is when you're talking about an elite quarterback. So there's that. And that was the early on case. Later, we started to mix it up a little bit, and we were a little more successful. But early on, that man coverage, we were really getting burnt on some plays. So that was tough. One of the things I also thought about was Pierre Lewis. Didn't see him on the edge. As I mentioned last week, I thought that outside of Mac, he has some of the best dip and lean. And Aaron Lynch, Irvin, all these guys we tried out on the edge just looked like whatever. And I thought Pierre Lewis looked like that he could give us some third down pressure. But Nick Kwiatkowski as well, showing consistent. You're talking about consistency. Not just against one team, not against 1 week. But consistently, when he's been out there, he's made plays in coverage, and he's been in position. And so one thing I think about is that, when we're talking about players in the preseason, second, third string, it's okay, they're not performing against third stringers or second stringers. But at the same time, they don't have the level of support of first stringers around them, starters. And so you get a guy like Pierre Lewis, where now he's got the starters around him. That puts him in position where he doesn't have to do as much, and he can focus on his job. Same thing for Kwiatkowski. Now, I don't think Kwiatkowski, again, is a coverage maven. I think he, can be a liability, but he's shown that he's a lot better than expected. And so that's in the short term. I thought both of those guys made a really good effort against the run. And definitely in pass, I thought Kevin Pierre Lewis and Kwiatkowski showed more than we thought, especially man coverage wise. So long term, I don't know, because Roquan and Trevathan are better than them. They just are. And so I wonder if there's a world where you can do 3 linebackers and use Roquan a little more in the nickel, or maybe you go to a dime look, I guess, because you don't want to take away Buster Screen, but you also want Roquan on the field. But I also think Nick Kwiatkowski isn't the liability we thought he was. So I wonder. But also Kevin Pierre-Louis. So in the future, I would like to see Pierre get some edge rush attempts, whether it's blitzes or just third downs. But also, I would like to see Nick on the field. So now you got 4 linebackers that could play. So long term, I think you got to flip one. But more than likely, Danny, especially after injuries, probably won't come back. And so that might be how it play out. But then you still got 3 linebackers that I think have good talent. And so I would like to see Pierre get some edge chances and, maybe get Nick some more field time, whatever way that works out. But at this point, Trevathan probably won't come back this season. And then they probably won't bring him back next year unless it's a cheap deal. So I'm not sure, but I really liked what I saw out of them. Kevin Tolliver, I think he should start. Again, same thing. I was the first to criticize Prince. Some backlash. And Prince and Fuller, as far as our overall athleticism, some backlash. But then when I try to defend him now, because people just blame him for everything, when I think Eddie Jackson was really an issue, then they're like, oh my God, he's sticking up for Prince, blah, blah, blah. But at this point, the speed matters. Again, he's a tough guy. He's gritty. He's smart. But at this point, especially when you go against the good teams, the athleticism matters. And the thing that really tipped the scales for me is that Tolliver was able, that one play, to not only be physical, not only keep up the receiver, but turn his head and make a play on the ball. Look, Tolliver coming out of LSU was a guy that you were worried he might not even make the team because he had that bad of an attitude and a reputation. And so the Bears had a locker room where people felt this might be good for him. And so I really was reserved on what he could do. I mean, because he wasn't great as a player and he had a horrible attitude, red flag character. And so seeing him mature, see him still be on the team, see him play special teams without any issues, and then to see him in the small things like that, but that's what it takes to see him getting his head around on the ball, making a play on the ball, to see that he's evolved his skill set a little bit. I think it's time. You just got to let him go out there and get some experience. I mean, Prince is just older. I mean, it is what it is. And that's long term. I mean, might be short term, but that's long term. And I think Tolliver did a little bit of good plays. And as far as Prince in this game, look, people try to talk crap. It just don't make any sense to me. Because, I see these people going crazy. Prince missed this tackle on Aaron Jones. Also, Hicks missed a tackle on Aaron Jones. Also, Fuller missed a tackle on a receiver. They try to isolate whoever they can to just make their narrative. And it's let's just use the whole context. He wasn't the only one that missed a tackle. He wasn't the only one that missed coverage. Half the time when these coverage happen, it's because somebody else ain't doing their job. Now, he got turned around by Devontae Adams, and other people did too. Buster Screen got beat by Devontae Adams on a touchdown. Okay, what are we talking about? No one's perfect. People just be waiting for one play to be whoops, see, told you. And so, again, I still think we need to replace him, but it's just some of the blame is overstated. So, as far as this game, especially with them scoring 21, I'm not going to sit here and blame it on Prince. Some people are just ready to sit here and be Prince is the reason we lost. I think that's ridiculous. I think a lot of people have those issues. But going forward, to wrap it up, even despite those things I said, I think our secondary, looking long-term, is our best asset. Despite the deficiencies, I think Eddie Jackson, great man coverage tool, needs to get better at playing center field. As much as people think that's crazy, it's true. He can jump a ball, he can bait people, but he makes some bad decisions out there deep this year, and he leaves people out to dry. But as you saw today in the man coverage tool, he's a beast. I mean, he's athletic. He's got a lot of skill. Kyle Fuller, probably the best in the league in a zone break type of situation. And not the fastest, but can tackle, can play short. I think he has a future. Clint Dix gives us a flexibility, even though I think we give up something in the run. I think the flexibility of what we've been able to do with the safeties is big. I mean, it's no shortage to look at our record, but also look at the defensive stats. And stats is one thing, I've always say that, but when you really look at the total picture, we should be a lot worse off than we are on defense. But especially with no pass rush. And I'll get to Khalil Mack on the next video, but with no pass rush, we should be a lot worse off than we are. And so short term and long term, I think the secondary has to be praised a lot more than they should be or they have been. And I would also throw Roquan and Trevathan in there as well. I think that we have gotten a lot more from them as pass coverage than people have given them credit for. And going forward, I think that's the strength that we got to build on. So overall, as far as the defensive effort, I give them a B- as well. Not great pass rush, but there were many times, especially against Aaron Rodgers, where this could have became a blowout. And instead, we held them to 21 and gave ourselves a chance. So definitely got to give them a B-. As far as a MVP, I gotta go to Pierre Lewis. There's some stops that he made that could have turned into big plays. The pass rush that he did provide on some blitzes. And there's definitely other guys, but I think I would lean him. And so as we wrap this up, and we'll talk more about the roster and break it all down. But it was a tough loss. Personally, everybody might feel different, but personally, I didn't see anything that I haven't talked about before. And it'll be interesting going forward. I'll just say that. So anyway, go to the comment section. If you made it this far, then go ahead and put cheese heads in the or put stupid cheese heads, because we hate the Packers. Put stupid cheese heads in the comments if you made it this far. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and remember, stay up and bear down.